Everybody has a story. Everybody is on a journey. Everybody is seeking the ultimate truth. Everybody is looking for the ultimate purpose of life. I wasn't exempt either, until I finally found what I was looking for. Where do I start? It's kind of a long story, and the last thing that I want to do is to bore my readers with the details, so without further ado, let's get straight to the point. I am Persian by descent, from Tehran, the capital of Iran. I was born and raised in a devout Muslim family, the Shiite sect of Islam to be specific. The name that my parents chose for me was the name of the founder of Islam, Muhammad. Like everybody else, I learned and practiced Islam, and at the time, it seemed like the only legitimate religion in the world, mainly because of how people are indoctrinated by the mainstream media, schools, and lack of free speech. Almost all Islamic states in the world are pretty isolated. I could never completely believe in everything that was written in the Quran. I always had philosophical and theological questions that were left unanswered. I remember how the idea of eternal conscious torment was always something I could never grasp. I could never understand how and why God would send people to a place called hell, instead of punishing them and killing them. I couldn't see how the traditional hell that even the majority of Christians seem to believe in, would be a just punishment. Apart from my questions, I always found following the Sharia to be almost impossible, and I found myself guilty of breaking it over and over again, but I didn't give up until I moved to Australia to study. When I arrived in Australia, I gradually broke more rules, and within a year, I decided to completely let go of Islam and become a deist. In case you don't know what deism means, it's a belief that there is most definitely a God, creator, but that all religions are man-made and untrustworthy. I felt pretty comfortable with that position, and I made all sorts of friends. Deep down I still knew what's right and wrong, and I would still find myself doing what's wrong. And feeling guilty before God is a very unpleasant feeling, as you all know. No matter how much you suppress the truth, there will be a time when you can't suppress it anymore, and the convictions can sometimes be crippling. In my conversations with God, I would often try to point the finger at God and ask him, why did you create me, or why do you let me live, or why don't you just finish me because I feel like I can't be who you want me to be, you expect too much from me. Anyways, I graduated from university, found a job, and I was waiting for my permanent visa, when a movie about the Bible caught my attention and I decided to watch it. I have to admit, the movie touched me spontaneously. It was as if God was speaking to me through this movie. At the time of watching the movie, I had a lot of convictions in my heart, not for breaking the Sharia, but for breaking the very basic laws of morality that I believed was written in my conscience, and I was also going through a physical injury that was getting worse and worse. The movie broke me down into tears. All of a sudden, I was madly in love with this Jesus, and I knew he was different than anyone else in history. But that's not enough, is it? Surely, I need to do some research and find out how much of this movie is based on historical facts. What can I really know about this Jesus? The idea of Jesus being called the Son of God was very troubling to me, perhaps because of how I was raised and taught strictly in the Quran that it's blasphemous to associate a partner with God, or call Jesus the Son of God. But other than that, the idea of God having a son would go against almost everything I believed about God and his unity. So I started to do some extensive research. I watched a couple of debates, and after the second one, it was almost as clear as day that Islam is wrong on so many levels that it just doesn't make sense. It has to steal from the Bible, which it considers to have changed over time, in order to make its case. Whether Bible has changed or not, Muslim apologists seemed to be dishonest in the debates when they were trying to make a case for Islam by taking certain verses in the Bible out of context. It wasn't enough. I read parts of the Bible and the words got through me, and I became confused as hell. On the one hand, Islam seemed to be a cult. On the other hand, something was holding me back, and I thought to myself, if Islam is a cult, then perhaps all religions are nothing more than cults, or perhaps there's no God at all? As soon as the thought of atheism came up, a voice was yelling through my conscience, as if I'm talking to myself, saying, you know that God is real, regardless of what any religion says, you can't deny him. And I was talking to God saying, God, I can't say you don't exist, and among all the people in history who have claimed to be sent from you, I'm having a hard time to say Jesus was a phony, so please help me God. I can't know what the truth is. I'm lost and words can't explain how desperate I am, and how certain I am that I cannot know the truth unless you somehow reveal it to me. Immediately after this little conversation with God I stopped crying, as something really peaceful took over and somehow told me that Jesus is the way, and I immediately decided to follow him. I know, my decision may have been hasty because I hadn't even read the whole Bible yet, but I went along with my intuitions because the peaceful experience of God's presence was real. It was like nothing I had ever experienced in my whole life. That night when I slept, I probably had the weirdest dream in my life. I was getting beat up by an evil character who was threatening me to come back to Islam or he will kill me, and I was crying and yelling at him that I have made my decision, and that there's no way I'm going back to Islam again. I woke up and after that, I haven't had a single nightmare ever, up to this very day. It was like a demon left me or something. But of course things got cruel again, mainly intellectually and emotionally because I ran into good arguments against Christianity, each of which would slap me with new waves of crippling doubts, but every time I would pray to God about it, I would hear him assure me of the truth of Christianity. I experienced the presence of God over and over, again and again. I have to tell you, if you have never entered into God's rest, when you do, you will know that this is what you've been looking for your entire life, because there's nothing like it. Words can't explain it. However, I'm sure some of you who are reading my testimony have experienced it too, but to the rest of you, if I wanted to give you an analogy of how good and comforting and peaceful God's presence is, maybe I can compare it to the best pleasure of this world known as climax, orgasm, and then claim that this peace is almost about 1,000,000 times better, if not more,